And what we can see is that with the election of Donald Trump, whether you like him or hate him, what we see for the people with eyes to see is that the system in its current form is ending. That is an absolute fact. There's some elements in our ancient hidden history that the Vedas cover very well. There's some elements that Christianity covers well.
You know, a group of people who become so powerful, they are like aliens to us, as you pointed out with the analogy with the cargo cults. I mean, that's a great illustration of it because it's, I mean, think about how removed from the world someone on a Pacific island is.
So my point is that it is very easy with high levels of technology where the lines between magic and sort of like god powers become very blurred. And then because now the economy is crashed, people are in survival mode, and we saw from the pandemic that if you put humans in fear, they can't think. If you are new to this podcast, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and to share, because that helps us to be recommended in the algorithms. If you would like to support this podcast, please check out our merch store on Amazon with the brand Todd and Me. We've got some cool t-shirts, tank tops, hoodies, and sweaters. Link will be in the description of this podcast. And if you're now starting a spiritual journey, you would like to start a spiritual journey, or you're currently on a spiritual journey and you would like some help removing some fears and traumas, please hit me up on my Instagram at Adriano_246, and it will help you to get some magic mushrooms. Enjoy the show and stay tuned because we have some more great content coming soon. Hello friends, and welcome back to the Conscious Man 7 podcast. I am your host Todd Cave, and on this episode I was a returning guest on the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast hosted by Mystic Mark, and we delved into many different topics, and we spoke about the power of the subconscious mind, which is demonstrated through the placebo effect, why service to others is what gives us the most joy in life and not through service to self, which is what we do right now, the importance of getting into shape mentally, physically, and spiritually, the importance of your diet, which isn't only the food you consume, but also the friends you keep and the information you consume, the fact that we don't have real money today because we have something called a fiat currency system, which means that the money is made up from thin air, so its intrinsic value is really zero. We spoke about the fact that religion was mostly spread through war and conquest, especially the Abrahamic religions, and why religion itself is just a bad idea. We also spoke about the significance of the orbs / plasmas that were sighted all over the planet and how it relates to what is to come. Now, this was a really good conversation. We bobbed and weaved through many different topics, and even though Mark and I have slightly different views on things, what I would say is that Mark is a really smart guy, and he's very open-minded to listen to other people's ideas, and I think that this is a trait that is really missing in a lot of humans today, because we are so stuck in our silos and our belief systems and in dogma. And I think that this conversation will add a lot of value to you, and it will help you to ask the right questions, because my mission here on earth is to help people ask the right questions so that they can break free from the conditioning, the programming, and the matrix, so that they can achieve their highest potential, because time is awfully short.
When truth is blurred by lies and misinformation, perception becomes reality. What will you perceive your reality to be?
Liberate your fears and walk with me.
Sit down and meditate. Connect with your soul.
Be a monster and then learn how to control it.
You gotta be willing to do the work.
So it really goes really deep in terms of words and etymology and what they mean. So this is why it is really hard to really crack the matrix, because there's so many levels and layers to it,
And here we are. back on the show. Todd, welcome back to the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast. I am excited to have you back on after our first two conversations. You definitely set yourself apart from the rest in some ways. So I'm excited to see what we get into today. What have you been up to since we last spoke? How have you been?
I've been well. I have been really, really busy. The having a podcast is a lot more work than a lot of people actually would think. And it's only when you put your hat into the arena and you say you can do it that you realize how challenging it is. So I've been doing my own show, The Conscious Man 7. And then obviously I'm a fitness coach. So I've been just helping my clients get into the best shape, and I also help them in other areas. Like sometimes I help them in challenges in their business and also in their personal life as well. Because what has happened to me is that because of my journey of what happened to me, where I was, and what I've become in the sense of all the challenges that I face have basically allowed me to be sort of like a life coach in a way, because I mix the physical with the esoteric and the spiritual. And I also am a very big believer in the power of the mind. And I'm very influenced by Joe Dispenza's work. And, like You Are the Placebo, um, Becoming Superhuman, how to um, evolve your mind and to break any habits of being yourself. So these type of books have really influenced me and realized like we all are actually greater than we think we are, and the power of the universe is inside of us. And it's only when you study the placebo effect you actually really understand how powerful the mind really is. And the mind can cure and the mind can harm, and it is really based on your thoughts, feelings, and the programming that you've received, as a child and a young adult as well, that determines sort of your belief systems. And what I've learned as well is that perception is based on information received, and you have to be very, very cognizant of the information you're putting inside of you, because your diet isn't just what you eat. It is about the friends that you keep, and it's about the information you put inside of you. So all of these are things that I've been helping my clients with, and they've been getting some really, really good results, and I'm really, really pleased. And like it's just like a dream for me to actually to be helping people, and like people just like Todd, like, thank you so much for like all the stuff you've done for me and helped me. And I'm just in like, oh, sometimes I show the messages to my mother and I'm like, I went to university to become a civil engineer, and here it is, I'm helping people in their lives. So, as a civil engineer, you impact people's lives in other ways, and now I am actually impacting people's lives in a different way. So I'm really happy, and that I'm able to do these things, and also wear another hat, which is doing podcast and also helping people with some of the information I share. So I've been really busy the last few months, like, because I've got like 61 shows on my podcast now, and I only started in June. And it's been really, I've been really honored to some of the guests I've had as well. I've had some really good guests. So between managing the podcast and the fitness business, it has been a lot for me, to be honest. So it keeps me very, very busy. And someone asked me if I actually like take breaks, and I say, well, when you like what you do, I don't really consider like taking breaks unless like the body shuts down and forces me to sleep 12 or 14 hours. Then yeah, that's when it kind of like slow down on it.
Mm, mm. Yeah. You mentioned Joseph Dispenza, or Dr. Joe Dispenza, and one of his books that I'm familiar with is Becoming Supernatural, which it definitely feels supernatural to reach a certain state of health in this world where the baseline is being underfed, under nutrient soil, and basically we're malnourished. That's the word I'm looking for, as a sort of default. So I imagine with the work you do, ushering people through these transformations can be tremendously rewarding, for you to see that in action.
Yes, it is really rewarding. I only realized like after like I had my massive spiritual awakening, which started like 8 years ago, that it is in service to others that you get the real joy in life, because we have been taught to basically serve ourselves, and this is the default sort of consciousness that is propagandized in us from the time we go into the school system and from the media and from the television and now with social media. So what happens is that when you actually go through, as they call it, a refinement period, you start to realize that it isn't really about you anymore. It is more about others. And the more that you help others, the more the universe helps you. So it is really a shift in mindset that allows you to understand these things, because when if you look at social media and you just look at a lot of people in general, it is always about me, I, and we have a saying in England, there's no I and we. And if we think more in we and us, it would help us to sort of break through that conditioning of just service to self. Because in service to self, what people realize is that you end up self-sabotaging and you end up cannibalizing yourself, because what tends to happen is that when you start to just look at yourself, you will do bad things or questionable things or judge other people very, very harshly, because you're only basing it on what is in it for you. But when you start to understand, and this is where I think empathy comes in one respect, and then also when you start to realize that the universe will provide you with everything, because there's something that Christ always used to say. He said that if the Father can provide for the birds and the bees, why do you think that He won't provide for you? And that is something that I've had to keep repeating to myself through my entire journey, because you get times where you start to have fear and you start to think that it's not going to work, or you're not progressing, you're not improving, you're still having the same breakdowns. But in reality, it is just a process of refinement. And this is why you call it your refinement period instead of the dark night of the soul, although they're the same thing in reality. But I prefer using refinement because as you refine gold more, gold becomes more and more pure. And this is why I use that word, because as the heat gets turned up more onto you, you burn away the impurities that were there in the removal of the layers of yourself. And what happens is that the harder it gets, the more you start to doubt. But you always have to realize that the Father won't give you anything that is too difficult for you. The Father knows, Source knows, the universe knows what it is you can take, but it's all about enduring to the end. So this is what I teach my clients, and this is what I tell myself on a daily basis, because I find that even though you're doing this work, you still have to remind yourself, because you can forget. And there's always, refining ever so slight. Sometimes something comes up that you kind of forget and you're like, okay, I need to remember that. I need to do that as well. Because you're telling people to do things, and then things show up in your own life, and then you're like, okay, this is familiar because I just dealt with this with my client. Okay, so you have to take your own advice. So it's always like this refinement that is ever so slight and ever so subtle. Because what I realized that when you first start is like this huge, huge thing. But as you walk the path more and more, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, to the point where you may not be able to see it anymore. But this is where the energetics come in, where the frequency come in, where it's like how it feels. And then this is where the nuance gets in, comes into play, where like, okay, you know what? It's just this little thing that I'm doing here, this thought that I'm having, this belief system, right? That you just need to tweak, and then you start to level up again, and then you walk the path, and then another challenge comes, because people seem to think that it stops, but it appears that it is forever. This refinement, you know?
Well, and all of that in consideration with something you said before we started the podcast, which is in some ways to me a little counter, but maybe there's a different way of understanding this. You talked about, you know, the signs that, you know, and maybe this is my own paraphrasing, but something along the lines of end times or the biblical signs that are present today. You know, how does somebody transform themselves for the better in that landscape? You know, I don't necessarily agree or disagree with the end times notion, but when somebody says, "Oh, well, this is what's being talked about in the Bible," it seems like that is kind of the implication. Is this uh, bettering yourself somehow part of this end times understanding? Is there an element to that involved? I mean, I guess purifying yourself for God's judgment would be the obvious, but is there more to it than that?
Well, it is that as well as other things. And the apocalypse, the end times, it basically means is the end of this system. And what we can see is that with the election of Donald Trump, whether you like him or hate him, what we see for the people with eyes to see is that the system in its current form is ending. That is an absolute fact. Because look at the things that he's doing in his administration now. So he's talking about having massive reforms in the education system, taxes, looking at how the aid money is being spent. We're having changes that he wants to bring in terms of like tariffs, taxes, all these kind of things. So what is happening is that there is a change in system that is happening, and it is going to affect the entire world. But the thing about it is that most people are not really even prepared for what is to come. And the way to prepare is to get yourself in shape mentally, physically, and spiritually. That is how you do it. Because we're going to be tested on so many levels. Because what people don't really understand is that the United States is actually broke. And the United States is the dollar is the reserve currency. And when the reserve currency falls, it is going to affect the entire planet. Because before, when the Federal Reserve was brought in 1913, countries, and even between 1913 to now, the countries that failed were not significant countries. We had countries like Weimar Republic, Venezuela, and then Argentina. Countries like that have failed, right? They've just they've defaulted on their debt. But what you have now is United States government, which is really a corporation that can't pay its debts because it doesn't the debt, the interest alone on the debt is so high that it is impossible to pay, right? We are probably adding like 2 trillion every 4 or 5 months to United States debt. So by the end of the year, we're probably going to be at 38 trillion plus. Like when you start to do the math on that, it's impossible. So what people are going to look to do is look to pull some of their resources out and put it into assets that will actually hold their value and appreciate. Precious metals, cryptocurrency, land, like even like tires and car parts and those kind of things that will be able to use for barter, right? And then on the physical side, you're gonna have to eat better. You're gonna have to get into shape because what's happening is that the magnetosphere around the planet is a lot lower. So we're receiving more light from the central sun. So a lot of people are being um, activated and woken up because of it. So this is why you're going to see then that people are going to start to lose their mind because when they start to realize like they've been told a lie, it's going to be very, very hard for them, right? And people are not going to be able to handle it, right? So it's going to be very, very difficult for them, you know. So it's going to be a challenging time for everyone, you know. And then when you look at the spiritual point of view, then religions are going to break down, because my research has shown me is that all the religions are not what they say they are. They're just control mechanisms to enslave your mind, because this is an absolute fact that what people don't realize. Nearly all religion were brought to the people in the form of conquerors and used as a framework to control their mind. So my main point here is that if you are a child of God and God is a part of you, in your imagination, God's supposed to look like you. And when you accept a picture of the deity assigned to you by another people, you become a spiritual prisoner of that other people. And if you look at all these religions, there's a Messiah figure, right? And this Messiah figure, what it does in the religion is that it makes you take the power from inside of you and put it outside of you. So you don't have to, according to religion, you don't have to do any work whatsoever. Just believe that this savior is going to save you, and that's it. It doesn't matter which religion. Most religions have this same mindset. So my point here is that when people start to realize that they've been hoodwinked and tricked by the economic system, the government itself is a farce, right? All they do is they steal from you because taxation is theft, and the money has no actual intrinsic value. And then the spiritual part in terms of the religion, then people are not going to be able to handle it. It's going to be extremely, extremely difficult for them. So this is why I'm telling people, look, the signs are here, that because one of the disciples asked Yeshua, how would you know when the time is near? He says, you will know by the signs. And if you look at what the changes that Donald Trump is looking to bring in, whether you like him or hate him, you think he's great or not, he's actually both good and bad, because some of the things that he's trying to change make sense, but they're going to have consequences for it. So the bad is going to be the consequences. But if you're not prepared in those three ways, mentally, spiritually, and physically, then as food becomes tighter in the supply chains, because countries stop trading with one another, when when you're starting to realize that religion is not what it say it is, and then that the people that are running the governments are satanic pedophile, Saturn solar cult worshippers, how are people going to handle all of that when it comes at the same time? So trying to tell someone, well, reading books and meditating and maybe doing some psychedelics might be a good thing. People are going to be like, dude, screw you. I have to feed my family, right? Like, this is hard times. And this is why I tell people, if you start to prepare now and work on yourself and go inside, when those times come, you will have enough belief in yourself and enough work will be there done that you'll be able to overcome it. But imagine you're doing the hard thing when it is hard, instead of doing the hard thing when it is easy, which is no. So this is what I try to tell people, that they have to prepare, because we're never going to go back to how it used to be. It will only deteriorate more and more and more. And when they start, if they ever audit the Federal Reserve, my goodness, when we see all the fraud that's been going on in the system, it will shock people, you know?
Yeah, well, I think we're well past that with shows like this. The number of people in this audience and all the other podcasts, including yours combined, we're at that breaking point to some extent. But I want to go back to something that you said that I disagree with, but that doesn't mean that we need to debate about it. But you said, religion is ultimately imposed upon people by conquerors. And in that case, not debating it, how does one become more spiritually adept in that atmosphere? What do you recommend?
So what I recommend is that you read as many of those like spiritual books as possible. Because what I've realized is that not one book has all of the information and all of the truth. There's some elements in our ancient hidden history that the Vedas cover very well. There's some elements that Christianity covers well. And then if you want to look at the Islamic religion, you can see what would be the end goal when a religion completely subjugates an area. Because when you just look at the Sharia law and the stuff that comes out of Islam, you will see that it is. Look, I can just be totally honest. Islam is one of the worst religions there is out there on the planet. It is and when I say Islam, I'm talking about the ideology, and I'm not talking about the people. I'm talking about the brain in the religion, the thought process. It's like a virus. It's actually a parasite. And what it does is that it subjugates its host and it sucks all the life out of the host, right? Because there are things in Islam that if we were to live under an Islamic state, people like you and I, Mark, we'd be dhimmis, and we'd have to pay something called the jizya tax, which is basically protection money, which is basically how the cartels do in Mexico. So if you have a business in a commercial area in Mexico, you have to pay protection money. And if you don't pay the protection money, you're killed. I mean, they don't kill you immediately, but there's steps that are taken and you be killed. And in this Islamic religion, it is free to join, but you pay with your life to get out of it. Because in the hadith, it says that he who changes his religion is punishable by death, right? So you take a shahada, which is like an oath, which is the same thing that you do similar to when you join in a gang or the cartels. So you have in those cases, it's probably like a blood oath where you have to go and maybe do some bad things, kill someone or beat up someone, something like that. In Islam, it's called the shahada. And you take the shahada, you can join. But then if you try to leave the religion and you're in an Islamic state, you can be killed. So my point here is that when you look at religion itself, look at Christianity. There's some good things in the book, but there are also some very heinous stuff in the book. And what are we to do with those bad things, right? People like to say, well, that was in those times. But when you dig a little bit deeper, well, the Bible itself is an amalgamation of books, right? Some of the stuff comes out of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, some comes out of the Upanishads, some comes out of the Veda, some comes out of the Sumerian tablets. So there's a combination of sources that is what making the book. But there's also a narrative that's being pushed at the same time, right? And what we have is, if you look at the history, Christianity was also spread by the sword. Islam was spread by the sword. And then Judaism, when in its early roots, was a conquering religion. Because if you look at the history, the God of the Jews, well, at that time, they weren't even called Jews. They were actually called Israelites, right? Or Hebrews. So the Israelite God, he didn't have land because his people were supposedly under slavery from Pharaoh. So that means that his people didn't have land. And then after they came out and they walked in the wilderness for 40 years, then they were given supposed this promised land. And how did they get that land? They fought like the Midianites. They fought other people and conquered their land. There was this story with the Ark and the Covenant. When the Ark and the Covenant was circumvoluted around the walls 7 times, and then the walls crumbled, right? And then the Israelites took over. So my point is that all of these, especially the Islamic, the Abrahamic religion, sorry, they were all spread through the sword. So if religion is supposed to be good, how come are there very bad and heinous acts committed in the name of God? How can we justify those? So if you look at the actual energy, you see that the energy of it is bad energy. It's blatantly telling you to kill, murder, rape, and pillage. So I always say, like, well, what do we do with those texts? What we do with that history, you know?
Well, what would we do with the lions, the tigers, and the bears? Oh my! I mean, nature kills, Todd. I would argue that, your life, my life is sacred. The life of a flower bud is sacred. The life of a fawn in the forest is sacred. But is it not sacred for the tiger cub to eat as well, and its mother to kill that fawn, take it to the den, and feed the fawn to the tiger cub? I mean, this is a cycle of life in some ways there's a political argument to be made about religions, and you've definitely done your research on the political history of religion. There's no doubting that. But I am curious, if there is a spiritual tradition that you find maybe more uh, eloquent than the ones that have been, as you say, uh, preached with a sword rather than with a open hand.
That's a good question. So what I do is I base a lot of how I think in terms of I looked at what Yeshua's words were, specifically his words. And if anyone wants to look at his words, there's something called the Red Letter Bible. And it's called Red Letter because the words are in red, and you can see specifically what supposedly Christ said. And when you actually read his words properly, you see that basically there was no sort of like violence in there. He was the most psychologically sound person, and when people were trying to attack him, he would always ask questions. And I try to model his behavior as much as I can. And then I also look at things like natural law, which is something that we don't observe right now. And natural law is similar to like the non-aggression principle, where I will respect you for what you do and you believe and stuff like that, but I'm not going to try to impose my will on you. And the problem that we have is that the backbone of religion in its original growth was imposition on other people. Now, through reformation of Christianity, that is not the case anymore. But in the case of, say, Islam, they've not had that reformation. So what I looked as well is that he says, Yeshua says, like, you love your brother as yourself. So if you break that down in another level, that would mean treat your brother. When you say brother, it would be your sister as well, because man at that time and brother was a collective word for both male and female. Um, Treat them how you want to be treated. So this is what I do. I would say, okay, if I want you to do something for me, I have to ask myself, would I do that thing for you if you were asked? That's how I start, how I think. If I am going to do something to you that is going to disadvantage you, I would ask myself, okay, would I want you to do that to me? So it's when you start to study and think in others, then that you are able to realize, hold on a minute, by me treating other people in a very bad way, I'm actually treating myself badly because energy is real. Because what you put out is what you receive. So how I do things is like I say, okay, how would I want to be treated? And I treat people to the best of my ability, how I would want to be treated. And this is one of the things that like not that is one of the things that I do. And then also I try to control my emotions, because I find that you know as men, when we lose control of our emotions, that is when you get things like physical violence and stuff. Because the world of a man is a little bit different from a woman, where when two men have a disagreement, we always know subconsciously that it can always escalate into physical violence. Women don't live in that reality. So I find that you have to learn as a man to be able to control your state, right? And this is very important, because if you lose control of your state, it means that you lose the ability to think and communicate effectively. So what I try to do now is like I try to ask questions. I try to be as respectful as I can, because I know that things can always escalate. And even if you're talking to someone, even if it's on the telephone, I try to tend to ask questions to find out, well, why are you thinking like this, or why are you what is bothering you? Because I realized that Christ, he used to ask a lot of questions, because that way now you're not necessarily imposing what you think onto other people, but by you asking them questions in a certain way, you're getting them to think for themselves. And this is really what he was doing, because he was trying to show everyone back then that there was a matrix, the matrix exists, and even like when they were basically selling salvation in the synagogues, like the the Jews at that time, they were they were basically receiving money and giving you animals to go and slaughter and stuff. So they were trying to sell you salvation. So the practices that I do are things like meditation. I read a lot of books. I watch the company that I keep, because if you hang around people that are negative, by default you're gonna end up becoming negative in some form or fashion. I also look at like the media that I consume, because someone asked me a question like, how am I able to, like, say, do podcasts? And obviously, I have to know stuff I'm talking about and do research and stuff like that. How am I able to stay so balanced and, relatively positive in terms of my outlook? And the reason is that I have to control the things that I follow in terms of like the media and stuff like that. Because if I over consume on negative media, I'm going to become a negative person, and that will affect me in my ability to communicate, because I become Mr. Doom and Gloom. And it's very easy to become, I think the term is black pilled, very nihilistic, where you think, well, what's the entire point? Just do whatever you feel like doing, because it's all going to go to shit anyway, right? So it's very easy to become like that. And then physical exercise, I train 3 to 4 days a week, and I eat good food. I eat high energy food. I cut out for the most part a lot of sugar, and I cut out mostly alcohol. But sometimes, you will have a drink here and there, because I think that life is all about balance. And another thing is, try to have balance in your life. The only part where I maybe not be balanced is that I work a lot, but that's because I like what I do. So I always like, I'm excited to do another podcast. I'm always excited to help a client, have a client call, get a new client, So for me, yes, it's work, but because I really like it, it's not chore. I don't ever get up and think, I gotta talk to this guy Mark today. Damn. You know what I mean? Nah, I'm like buzzing all day because I know I'm gonna talk to you. If I have like a call, my client, I want to help them through something, I'm like, okay, you know what I mean? Like, I'm actually sitting down thinking, what points do I want to cover and how I can help them. So because I like it so much, that's my only, like, I would say, like, where I can probably improve, because my aunt asked me up to yesterday, she says, but when do you rest? I said, well, honestly, probably when the body shuts down and I need to sleep 13 or 14 hours, and then I get up and do it again. But that's because I genuinely like what I do. So it doesn't actually really feel like work to me. So basically, that's what I do. I eat well, do exercise, I watch the friends that I keep. I also, I'm very cautious of the women that I keep in my life as well. I do meditation, and I consume like enough media to see understand the narrative, what is going on, but not over consume of it to make me feel like if it's the world is going to end tomorrow, and say sod it, you know what I mean, just go out there, drink and shag and do all that, because it's very easy to have that mindset if you over consume on the information. And then another thing, like I would say to people, is try to find something that you like to do that genuinely gives you happiness. So like one of the things that I give my clients to do is I tell them to do an enjoyable activity at least twice a week, right? Because what this does now is that if you go and do like one of my clients, she loves pickleball. And then another one of my clients, they like skiing and snowboarding because they live in the mountains. So I say, well, look, do these things as your enjoyable activities, because what these things do is that they give you mental breaks from the matrix. So while you're doing those things, you're not thinking about the bills you have to pay, the email that you need to write for your boss, you know what I mean, that you need to get back home to do this and next and the third. You're just enjoying the moment. And what that does is that helps to create a mindset of like, you know what, my life is good, because the more good things you look for in your life, the more things you find. So these are the things that I do in my personal life, and I teach to my clients, and my clients that follow my my guidance, they feel not only good, but they get great results. And it's only the ones that don't follow that those the ones that, don't get the results, and they tend to drop off because they just don't follow, because it's not easy, I know, but you have to always believe that you can do it. And this is why I always work a lot on mindset, because I think mindset is probably the most important part of this entire jigsaw puzzle on earth in the human experience. Mindset. So I tell people, focus 80% on your mindset and 20% on the doing. And if you do it that way, you'll find that you can make better choices, and you can actually attract and manifest more the things that you want in your life.
Yeah. I really appreciate the way you say that, and I resonate with it deeply. I think sometimes I overshadow my history with this podcast, try to take myself out of it as much as possible, but people want to hear about me from time to time, occasionally, I think. And I don't know that I would have the dedication that I do to the podcast nor the research if I wasn't a martial artist for such a greater part of my life. Although I'm not practicing on a regular basis now, it created a foundation mentally that altered the trajectory of my life in a positive way. So if somebody hasn't experienced that, I guess the popular term would be like a runner's high, would maybe be a popular idea that people have heard of. But when you create a real mind body connection, your soul then takes a step in too, I think, or at least you now have that next layer of access. It's not an immediate thing where your soul then is there, but I noticed after taking the approach to martial arts that I did in a very serious way, there was a real tangible difference, and it was noticeable in my life, and my peers treated me differently in some sense. But it's something that I think, when people are like, oh, well, impressed with the podcast, like I don't put a lot of thought into it, because to me, it's just a part of who I am. Putting this much time and effort into something feels like it's supposed to be natural, but I guess that's because I've reaped the rewards of it once. I don't know, maybe we're standing on a vantage point that others can't relate to, but I get the sense that you have that same mind body connection. If you'd like to elaborate on that further, if you can.
Yeah, sure. So in my case, one of the things that really helped me through my refinement period at its most difficult parts was actually exercise. And while exercise doesn't necessarily solve the challenges that you have in your life, what it does is it gives you a mental break from them. And the more mental breaks you have from them, the more it gives you the ability to find the solutions to those things. The other thing was meditation, because meditation really is like exercise for the body. And what we've not been taught the importance of actually eating good food, getting the body moving, and meditation. Those things are the things that really helped me through it all, because the challenges that I was facing at the time, went through, still going through to some degree, they really shook my foundation of myself. And I think that unless you actually have a shake in your identity, the things that we're talking about tonight will not necessarily resonate with you, because you're still sort of in the matrix. And I understand, because I used to be in the matrix and I was fully into it in my former life. But in my case, all those things were taken away from me. And it was only after they were taken away that I started to really start to like awaken. And what I realized is that, excuse me, human beings don't seem to ever wake up unless they go through the most difficult challenges in their life, until their paradigm is absolutely shifted, till things are removed from their life, or they hit a low that is so low that it breaks and shatters the hologram and the image that they've built in themselves. Then they will never wake up, and they will never be able to understand the mind body connection. The only way you're going to be able to understand the mind body connection is to have a complete breakdown in yourself. Now, sometimes that is induced by yourself because you realize that there's more to your life than what you've been told. Or in my case, it was from force by the universe that basically just changed my entire life. But either way, that is how you wake up. Now, the thing is that when you can't, my journey is that you can't, I realize that you can't separate one from the other two. The mind, the body, and the spirit are basically one, because you are a mind, body, spirit complex. So you have to work on all three of those parts of you simultaneously. You can't think, oh, well, you know what? Meditation is great because it can connect to source, but you're not going to get to the highest level if your body is not in shape, if you're slow, because what happens is that you're going to hit a plateau, because light consciousness, it is all information. The more information you receive, the more consciousness you get, the more light comes into your body, and the body has to be physically strong enough to maintain and to accept this light. So if your body's not strong, there'll be a limit on the amount of light you can take. And then getting the body strong also requires some sort of discipline, like how you were alluding to in terms of martial arts, because it's going to take discipline to follow a meal plan, to eat the things that you're not supposed to eat. It's going to take discipline to go and do exercise, whatever form that is. But I would suggest it is some sort of resistance training, whether it's calisthenics or is weightlifting. But it has to be something that pushes your body. The reason for that is that in pushing your body, you also end up pushing the mind, because the mind is stronger than the body. So you will see that there's already a symbiotic relationship in terms of doing exercise. And when you get the body moving, you eat better food, then you start to realize that you have this great spirit inside of you. And when you start to realize the spirit inside of you, things like meditation will accentuate the the recognition of the spirit inside of you. But you can't do one in isolation. You have to do all three. Get the body strong, work on your mindset, and your mindset comes from beliefs. It comes from the belief system. It comes from your childhood, to be honest with you, because we have a lot of human beings on the planet right now walking this earth who are absolutely broken. And I put myself in that same category because I'm no better than anyone, because I have things in my childhood that I am still dealing with, certain fears and traumas and belief systems. And unless we start to really work on those belief systems, we're going to self-sabotage all the time. And I see it sometimes in my clients, where I would get clients that would get really, really good results, and literally, Mark, they just disappear. They just ghost me. Can't hear back from them, right? And what I realize is that some people are afraid of their own success. So because they're actually getting results, they're getting into the shape that they always want, it's almost like that belief system is like, oh no, I'm not good enough. I don't deserve this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to have a confirmation bias and just stop doing everything that I was doing, so I can go back to what I used to be, so I can confirm, yes, I am not good enough. And yes, I don't deserve to get into shape. And that comes from your childhood. Maybe, you know, something with your parents, maybe they told you, oh, you're just not good enough. You're good for nothing, blah, blah, blah. These are things that you need to work on, because the fears, the traumas, and the belief systems come from our youth. So mindset, getting the body in shape, doing things like meditation, and then I would open the door to things like psychedelics as well, because they help you to sort of like force you to see those things that are causing you the challenges and causing you to self-sabotage, and then you can work on them through things like meditation or just forgiveness. That's another thing that's quite important, because the things that you failed in, you need to forgive yourself of, because you didn't actually fail, you just realized, well, maybe that's not a good idea, so you wouldn't do that in the future. So it's not really good to think that you failed. Just look at, you had a lot of life lessons, you know? And that's how I try to put it. So the mind, the body, and the spirit have a symbiotic relationship. You have to work on all of them together, because in isolation, they're weak. But together, they're a very, very strong unit.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you're right on track with maybe what I failed at saying earlier, which is that you sort of, at least in my experience, as I grew awareness of my mind body connection, my soul mind body connection was almost like a whole package, as you put it. So yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think the visualization that goes along with certain feats of athleticism, not just martial arts, but even weightlifting to a certain extent, you have to visualize yourself in these different positions and movements. And once that is possible, I think that made it a lot easier for me to conceive something like a visualization exercise when I first got into the occult and these kind of strange topics. I was much younger and just kind of looking at the whole world curiously, and it didn't make a lot of sense until later on when I had that experience as an athlete and the visceral memories of different visualizations, whether it was seeing a certain technique in my mind before performing it or seeing myself win a match and then winning the match. There were certain visualization moments that kind of cued me into, okay, well, there's probably more to these other things that don't involve the body as much, or maybe not as much as you'd think. But to your point, it's all connected. I'm certainly with you there. I do want to switch over to something you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation before we started recording, unless you have any final thoughts on what we were just talking about.
No, that's fine. I pretty much covered that. I think
Yeah.
you confirmed and you highlighted as well. They all have a symbiotic relationship.
Absolutely. Well, and that's why I feel maybe there's a segue somewhere to this other topic, because I often wonder how orbs and these strange anomalous sightings, whether it's in the realm of cryptozoology or ufology, where these fit symbiotically into the whole, right? Because oftentimes science will either dismiss them outright, they will maybe try to explain them in mundane terms. And then maybe the more open minded scientists will try to suppose some sort of biological, organic, or physical phenomena behind it that's yet to be understood fully, right? But for the most part, those are all within the framework of material explanations of something like an orb. So, from the spiritual perspective, what's going on with orbs? Um, what's your thoughts?
My thoughts are that they are prepping us for the disclosure that they want to give us. But I think it's also multifaceted, because from looking at the tea leaves, there's only one event on earth that they can really pull to get us in unison to sort of like follow their plans. And that is the alien agenda. And I can't remember who said it, but they said when all else fails, there's always the alien agenda that they can pull. And what I see is that they're seeding our consciousness with the idea of extraterrestrials. Now, the funny thing about that is that the Pentagon admitted that there is extraterrestrial life. You have people like Paul Hellyer, who was the ex-defense minister of Canada, who spoke in Congress. I can't remember when, but he said that extraterrestrials are real and these beings would want to work with us, but we're basically too violent and we have nuclear weapons. And one of the conditions that they would have for them to engage with us is if we could get rid of nuclear weapons. So my point is that when you look back into antiquity and you go back to the ancient records, there is a common theme. So you have the Aborigines in Australia. They say in their folklore that they were seeded here on Earth by the Palladians. You have the Dogon tribe that said that their gods were from Sirius. You have the Mesopotamian people, the people of Mesopotamia, who say that their gods, they call them the Anuna gods or the Anunnaki, they were from another planet. They say it's Nibiru. You have the Hopi tribe in America that say that they were they talk about the blue Kachina and the red Kachina. They talk about the ant people. And the ant people, I would say, sounds the way they describe them very similar to the Anuna gods. So then we have the Maya and you have the Inca that say that their gods were from the stars. They were not from Earth. So we have different sets of people, different geographical locations, separated by water, speaking different languages, all have a similar story. And then the Pentagon confirmed that extraterrestrials are real. So the way I see it is that these orbs, whether they're fake, real, or a combination of both, is just a seed in the consciousness of man. Because don't forget, they were not only sighted in the United States, they were spotted in the United Kingdom, they were spotted in Europe, they were spotted in all over the planet. And this is part of the bigger, I would say, psyop that basically because how like similar to when they had all these movies prior to the pandemic about a pandemic, right? So basically, if you look at the way the rulers of this world operate, they always show you what they're going to do, and they use predictive programming, and they follow the problem reaction solution model. So from looking at the tea leaves and then looking at how to get there, I think that the card that they're going to pull to get us there is the economic card, which is why I touched on that earlier. So if they crash the system, because don't forget they own this planet lock, stock, and barrel. Think about it. If they were able to shut down the entire planet, why do people think that they can't crash the market if they wanted to? It's just a matter of when they get their ducks in line, when they think they can do it. So I think the economic card is going to become a very important one. And then when they pull the plug on the economy and they send us back into the dark ages, because it's going to be global, because the entire monetary system is based on the United States dollar, which is based on nothing because it's a fiat currency. It is created by fiat, which is by decree, which means they just say that it has value and they say it has value and that's it. They can pull it out of their swing and basically say, hey, we use this as money and we would just go on with it. So to get us to there, you have to crash the economy. And when they crash the economy, all mayhem would break loose. So I can see how that is very possible because I was in 2023, I was in a Cat 5 hurricane when I was in Acapulco living. And I saw what the end of the world looks like the next day and the day after. The place was destroyed. And I saw humans just looting every single thing, my brother. So I was like, okay, if the United States dollar goes to zero tomorrow, you can't get any money with the cash machines. Your cards don't work. What are people going to do? They're going to do the exact same thing that they did the day after Hurricane Otis smashed Acapulco in Mexico, right? Now, when you have humans in that state of fear and panic, right, then you can bring in the extraterrestrial element of it quite easily because the government can come and say, hey, citizenry, these guys are our friends. They have amazing ideas and technology that can make us level up where we're at now, XYZ. And dude, people would believe it because all they need to do is do some really good feats of magic. And this is the thing, it may not really be magic, it may just be using high technology. Because if you were to go back 2,000 years and you were to show anybody that was alive at the time when Yeshua was alive, and you pull your smartphone or your pocket mark, and you somehow had the ability to have wireless internet to connect, and you were showing them videos on your phone, they would think you're a god and you're doing magic. So my point is that it is very easy with high levels of technology where the lines between magic and sort of like god powers become very blurred. And then because now the economy is crashed, people are in survival mode. And we saw from the pandemic that if you put humans in fear, they can't think. This is why many people injecting themselves with poison. And it is poison because it's been proven that it was poison. It's very easy then that if you crash the economy, make us starve, put us in a state of extreme fear, people that have families to feed, they're going to freak out. You bring some extraterrestrials on Earth and they do magnificent things, then say, hey, listen, though, guys, if you want to be like these guys, we got a simple solution. Just put this chip in your brain and you can be like these guys. And I'm telling you, loads of people would do it. This is why I say that there's the good, the bad, and the ugly with Donald Trump. And I think that his faction is the one that wants to enslave us through technocracy, AI, and technology.
Well, you said Acapulco was where
Acapulco.
Acapulco. We had a hurricane that was pretty devastating just this past year on the East Coast, and I had two different people on the show who lived through that storm, and it might not have been on the same level as the hurricane you survived. God bless you. But I will say, here in the United States, the looting thing doesn't happen in every community. It does happen. Don't get me wrong. It does happen. But we talked to two different people who went through this hurricane on the East Coast, North Carolina, South Carolina, and even into the Appalachian Mountains to some bit there, affecting some of those states too. Tennessee, I believe, was probably most affected. But we didn't have that kind of response. And I'm not saying that Americans are better than anyone else because of that, but there is a certain level of I don't know, community that's exhibited when these certain things happen, no matter where. And I'm sure the same thing happened in Mexico. I'm sure if you racked your mind, you'd probably think of a couple of encounters you had with great deals, people being kind and generous as they can and helping others in that, in the wake of that devastation. I mean, people go to great lengths to help each other in those moments to my surprise, and I guess, counter to your point, which I'm not trying to be contrarian or anything, but I have had this conversation enough times on the podcast to where I wonder how this alien agenda theory really fits into that. I wonder if that was the case maybe 10, 20 years ago, and now they couldn't pull something like that off because we have the New Jersey drones that were flying around, and who knows, really. I mean, I was wrong probably about what those were. My audience, or at least the tinfoil hat audience, wasn't exactly impressed with my analysis of the New Jersey drones. But yeah, it does seem like the population of people that are informing themselves with alternative media, which is growing by the day, are less likely to be fooled by something like that. But and at the same time, I wonder where that fits into the whole idea of, this ancient alien concept, because yeah, it does seem like the same people who want us to believe there are aliens in the sky flying here from other planets practice this sort of occult ritual religion behind the scenes. And, we've had Ryder Lee on the show a couple times, and one of his topics that we dove into with him was all the disinformation agents who posed as ufologists in the 20th century. I mean, there's a huge list of them, and the ones that weren't directly connected to the CIA or the FBI were being messed with by the FBI and the CIA, whether that was through fake information or just straight up harassment. But it's clear that something's going on with the alien stuff, right? It's just, I wonder, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I wonder how much of it is the government just sort of playing the same trick on us and expecting different results, or maybe they've worn this out and now in this new digital age they're going that transhumanist route that you alluded to, with the chip in the brain and all the other perks of being plugged completely into the matrix.
So I I look at a lot of the stuff that happened in antiquity, and the reason is that you see a lot of patterns and cycles. And I understand your point, but I would counter that to say that there's something called cargo cults. And cargo cults really show us that when one set of people that appear to be so much more advanced and superior to another group of people, that quotation marks inferior people tend to worship them. And this is proved through cargo cults. And this seems to have been the case when the Anuna gods were here on Earth walking amongst man. And there was a pre-existing hominid species that was there. And according to the way the tablets read, they mix their DNA with that existing hominid species. And when they created us in this form, we ended up worshiping them because they were much more advanced than us. Now, when you look at even some of the Vedas, they talk about the wars of the gods, and they used to talk about things called Vimanas, which are flying cities. Excuse me. The Vedas have blueprints for these same cities. They talk about Brahma weapons, which would be like nuclear weapons, and they talk about god killers and all that kind of stuff. So my point here is that when you look back at antiquity, there seem to have been an interference of the hominid species that was on Earth. There was some sort of a tinker with it and created us. And in the Sumerian tablets, even they admit that that was breaking one of the cosmic laws, that they know that they would be punished for that. But what happened is that when they created mankind in this current form, they created us as a slave race. So we were never supposed to really reach a high level of consciousness. And what happened is that because we started to get to a high level of consciousness, they wiped us out. Either some information says that they're the reason they caused one of the floods. Other information says that they just didn't tell us that there was going to be a flood. But long story short, there was a reset. And there's been a systematic dumbing down of humanity from every cataclysm. Because if you just look at for example, look at the Ayanis Temple, look at Kef Kalesi, look at Gobekli Tepe, look at Lake Vaughan, you're seeing andesite and basalt blocks that are megaliths that are cut with precision, that we can't manipulate to that level now. We just don't have the technology. We have information in cuneiform on the Ionis site that it looks like it could be one of the first places where they had the cross and they had the passing of the knowledge to mankind. So there has been times where they've given us advanced knowledge, but again, because of the something that's wired in us, and this is something that's called that seems to be like a worship gene. We have this predisposition to worship greater beings. Now, let me go on let me give an allegory. Look at how we look at movie stars and celebrities. I would argue that that is some form of worship. Look at someone like Taylor Swift, 182 million followers on Instagram. She is almost worshipped. The way people will freak out and behave just to go and see her or to be in her presence. And she's just a human being like us. That is sort of like worship, right? Look at even like Michael Jackson, when Michael Jackson was alive, when he was still in his heyday performing, girls would faint and all that kind of stuff when they just being near him. The way we react with stars is similar to behavior to how we would react when the Anuna gods come back on earth and display magnificent feats of maybe healing, teleportation, telekinesis. Who knows what feats they're gonna do? But when we look at all these ancient books and texts, there is an element of us worshiping them. And if we did it in the past, we'll do it again because there's nothing new under the sun and everything seems to be cyclical. Now, the reason why I say that it looks like they're trying to seed our consciousness is that the information shows that these Anuna gods are going to come back, right? So if they're going to come back, the one way that you would have to get them to come back where we accept them is if everything in this paradigm is destroyed: government, religion, and money. Because you do have a point where you say that not everybody behaves like that in terms of looting. But think about it, right? As I always say, the three main religions, if all three religions are broken, so the money goes to zero, we start to realize that what they're teaching us in religion doesn't actually get us closer to source, right? Then you realize that the government is just a bunch of satanic, pedophilic, solar cult worshippers that are just trying to enslave us and kill us. Can you imagine when humanity wakes up to those three things simultaneously? It's going to completely destroy our entire paradigm to the point where people are going to freak out, Mark. Can you imagine the religious people? They wake up and they realize everything I've been told about my religion and my religion is my life is a lie. Can you imagine how they're going to react?
Well, I think that, it's a novel idea, but I doubt it could ever happen. I mean, given the amount of, just sheer power and wealth that organized religions amass, and each sort of, major religion, although they do have a common origin, they are kind of they have vested interests when you look at each of them, whether we're talking about Israel, whether we're talking about the Western nations and Christianity, or we're talking about the Muslim nations and Islam. I mean, they all have a political vested interest in their religion. So I, although I, again, it's a novel idea, I just have a hard time conceiving something like this being fabricated. Then again, if there is a 10th planet and it gets within range of Earth again, as the ancient texts say it did in the ancient past, and these beings show up and they're 5 to 10 feet taller than us on average, yeah, I can see how that would shake things up. But according to a lot of the researchers I talked to on this show, it seems like those beings sort of set the stage for these religions to be put in place to some extent. And then furthermore, those who consider themselves elite and have the power to back it up and the wealth to back it up, they do have these meticulously curated bloodlines that people have speculated to some extent that that is evidence of their connection to these beings you have described, whether they're ancient geneticists by, technology or some mystical means somehow. I mean, it's so far in the past. How could we even translate such a thing? Maybe we can, but I wonder, if this isn't already going on. I mean, H.G. Wells's War of the Worlds is exactly this concept that you're describing, where the elites build a technology so great that the average people think they're being invaded by aliens, when in fact it's not aliens. I mean, this is what H.G. Wells was warning us against, is a group of people who become so powerful they are like aliens to us, as you pointed out with the analogy with the cargo cults. I mean, that's a great illustration of it, because think about how removed from the world someone on a Pacific island is. And then all of a sudden these GIs show up in, multiple different types of vehicles you've never seen before, not just planes, but boats and the little Jeeps that they pull up and drive around the islands on. And of course, the, supplies that on an island, I mean, your resources come from the ocean. So to get something from the sky, obviously, you're going to equate that to heavens, the gods, etc. I think, yeah, that's brilliant. But I do wonder, if this, Project Bluebeam agenda is even possible with people as intelligent as we are today. I mean, the collective consciousness grows. Of course, there's always going to be the ignorant masses, but I feel like the cutting edge of the population is enough to keep everyone else afloat in that sense. Like, the collective consciousness is not stifled by these sort of tricks. Maybe I'm too optimistic or idealist, but what do you think about that?
So I agree and disagree at the same time, because I am optimistic in a sense. I think that the greater consciousness is going to pull through, but that's not where we're at now, Mark. That's the thing. Because if you just look at how many people were jabbed, some estimates that at least 60% of the entire planet was jabbed. So it is greater than 50% for sure. So if you just look at, and for me, sadly, that is the litmus test of the consciousness of man. To go and inject yourself in something that is a test, has no evidence to back it up to say if it works, and you just believe in people. There's also something that you didn't realize, is that we're having a spiritual awakening at the moment. People are waking up to I get messages every day from people, every week, from people that are now starting this process, and people are waking up. The thing is that when you start to wake up, it's a very, very painful process. And when you start to get the entire sort of like fabric of your being just ripped away from you, what you're left with is just like the mere pieces. And it's hard for people to build themselves back up, because can you imagine you are a wealthy person, multi-millionaire, and then you wake up to the fact that you did a lot of bad things. And there's not necessarily for all wealthy people, but there's just a snapshot to show you an example. You did a lot of questionable things to get very, very, very rich. Can you imagine when you wake up thinking that money was everything, and you realize that your conscience now is telling you that you did really bad things? That's going to really hurt you, right? I mean, it's going to destroy you, because your whole entire thought process is just, I got to get mine. I got to get mine. I got to make more money. And then when that realization is like, hold on a minute, I did really bad things to get that, that is going to destroy that person. So my point is that the way the entire system has been created is that one of the three main religions has affected us. And in some cases, all three will affect some people. But what is an absolute fact is that the economic system will crash. It's mathematically impossible not to crash. Religion does not get you close to source, and it has a lot of holes in the narratives in religion, and it will be exposed because this is what the apocalypse means. It means the lifting of the veil, the revealing. And then when people find out that Jeffrey Epstein and this whole Puff Daddy issue they're all linked, where very, very powerful people are pedophiles and they're the ones that control the planet. So can you imagine when that we in the quotation marks conspiracy world know that, but can you imagine the average person on the street, Mark, knows that? It's going to destroy them because they're thinking the government is their friend. So, so can you imagine when they wake up that, hold on a minute, the money's fake. The government is full of pedophiles and they're the cartels dressing in suits. And the religion that I thought was my solace is actually made up by beings that don't have my best interest at heart and it's all fake. Mark, it's going to destroy people's minds and people are not going to know how to act because I've been through that path. And I'm telling you, when that was happening to me, everybody else was quotation marks normal. But can you imagine when multiples of people have that experience at the same time? The planet is going to get extremely dark because it is the collective energy at the time that will rule. But it will not last forever. And the people like me, the people like you with your show, and the guests that you interview are people that are trying to help people so they'll be able to find refuge. But we're in a minority right now. Most people are still not woken up, my friend. Most people just think that it is exactly how they tell them on TV.
Yeah.
So
No, I see your point. I think, unfortunately, for worse or for better, I don't put a lot of stock into a big final event. Maybe it's because I've had too many run-ins with Jehovah Witnesses or something. But no, I think there's an element to this millionairistic concept that is like propaganda, and it could be one of the oldest pieces of propaganda. And I'm not saying that that necessarily negates the possibility of an apocalypse, but I think we've been led to believe that there is like a final inevitability, and I don't know that it is as inevitable as maybe some of these propagandists like to imply, and hold it over people's heads as a sort of punishment in waiting, that you need to atone for ahead of time to be on the up and up. There's definitely the moral protocol there that I understand, where you need something like that in some terms to keep society in order, I guess. But it seems like maybe there's other options, I guess. I don't know. But take me back to this star worship, because it does seem like what you said earlier about religions, particularly the conquerors imposing religion. I mean, if there's one religion that comes to mind, it's Catholicism, the Roman Catholic Church, which has taken upon itself all of North, South America, Africa, the Caribbean. They've taken all these, and the South Pacific, Australia. They've taken these places and completely wiped out what was originally the culture there, or at the time of their arrival, the culture there, and in that sense, it's like a great beast, this great beast. And what irony that their own religion that they claim to espouse is alluding to this great beast, as we're talking about, right? In the end times. I mean, that's what I think of when I think of the beast, but it could be the industrial revolution and the technology itself. I think that's the new sort of interpretation. Obviously, AI has become maybe a fill-in, but I would argue that, I guess, in one total package, you can't really separate the three. They're all together. Like the technology is a result of these civilizations in that sense.
yeah, the thing is that's really mad about it is that they write these books because they know that these things are going to happen, and the reason why they know these things are going to happen is because they're going to fulfill them. That is the irony of it, right? They wrote the books to fulfill it because it is an inverted world that we live in. Now, you're right in the sense of the Catholicism and Christianity have basically like this behemoth that have spread, and they basically spread through the sword and just conquering. Now, to just go back slightly to one of the points you were saying, I don't think that it's going to be like a massive event that all of this is going to happen. I think it's going to happen like bit by bit by bit by bit but eventually it will all come to a point. And the reason why I say it will all come to a point is because Christ said that, you know what I mean, there's going to be an end, right? Because don't forget, his disciples asked him, how will we know when the end is near? He says, you'll be able to tell by these signs. And what we have are signs that things are coming to an end. Christ also said, I did not come here to judge. I have reserved judgment for the Son. And who are the Son? We are the sons of man. So we end up judging ourselves. So the reason why I said that is going to become very difficult for people, and I use the allegory of, say, a rich man that did a lot of bad things to get a lot of money, is that when he has his awakening, he's going to judge himself so hard because he's going to realize, hold on a minute, I was a terrible human being. But he didn't have that realization at the time. And when he realizes that he was a terrible human being, that's going to hurt him so much because he thought he was good. He thought he was doing the right thing. So that's my point, that when the realization occurs that these things like government, religion, and money are not there to serve us well, not necessarily that it's going to be all together, but it's going to be like different stages because some people are going to be affected by different things. Some people that are really, really religious, when they wake up that religion isn't what they have been told, that's going to completely shift their paradigm, right? The people that believe that government is their friend and there to help them, when they realize that the state actually is trying to kill them, that's going to be very, very hard for them to accept because they're just doing what they're told. Similar to how, like, when I had the Nuremberg trials, and the soldiers said, "But we were just following orders." And what did they say? There's no excuse for just following orders, right? Those people that were just following what the government said to do and believing what they see on TV and the propaganda, there's no excuse for that, right? Because and that's going to hurt them. And then the people that are into materialism and consumerism, so where it's all about money, having the latest phone, having the latest car, like, there's some people that's how they base their entire life, on all the things that they have. So when they get the realization that those things are empty and meaningless and you can't carry them to the next life, they're going to have a breakdown in themselves as well. So what's going to happen is that everybody is going to have one or of those three main religions affect them. Some people, it may be all three. But my point is that it's going to be very, very hard because that is what the apocalypse, which is just the revealing. The apocalypse doesn't necessarily mean an end event. That's also propaganda. It literally just means the lifting of the veil, the revealing. So when all truth is revealed, right? And this is what scripture says, that all truth will be revealed, right? Because you can only bury the truth and hide the truth for some time. Because the truth is the truth, it will always, always come back. It's like a lion. You can't defeat a lion in the jungle. You can maybe starve out the lion. You may kill some, but you're not going to kill all. So my point is that all of the things that the history, because the way I understand it is that one day we can just get up and we can know. Because this is where it talks about the return of the Son of Man strikes in the east and flashes in the west, which means that it's a global event. Now, the only thing that can be global like that is a shift in consciousness. And what we are seeing is that we're seeing a lot of people that are being activated, people like myself that have a purpose, that have been shown and told that this is your purpose to do. I was told, Todd, do podcasts. I was told that I've shared this story quite a few times. I was walking about my dreams, out of my sleep, and the voice came in and said, Todd, do podcasts, right? And that's what I'm doing. So I'm answering my call. So, like scripture says, many are called, but few are chosen, right? So I'm just doing my part into lift up a few rocks and say, hey, you may want to look there. I'm opening a few doors and say, hey, you may want to look through there. All I'm doing is I'm provoking thought, right? I don't claim to have all of the answers and know all the truth, but what I'm saying is that what we've been told is a lie. That is, I think that most people can accept that are critical thinkers. What we've been told is a lie. What the actual truth is blurred between between reality and myth, and sometimes they merge in and out. So it's hard to tell. But what we do know is that we're going through a lot of changes on the earth right now. We're having spiritual changes. And when you start to become more spiritually inclined, you can feel the shift. Like, I'm here on holiday in Barbados, and I met a lovely lady at the time when I went out with my mother and my sister, and she was telling me about Shanga. So Shanga is another psychedelic, right? Which is like the smokable version of ayahuasca. And I was like, wow, this is like amazing, right? So I'm gonna try to see if we can do a ceremony with her. But my point is that when you start to vibrate a certain frequency, you start to realize that you attract certain people. She's a medicine woman. Never in my life, Mark. Barbados has 300,000 people that I would think I would be in Barbados having a conversation with a medicine woman who is that's telling me about psychedelics and all that kind of stuff. So what I'm trying to say is that we're having a shift in consciousness, right? We're having a shift in energy. So what's happening is that the people that are doing the work are going to start to realize that it is based on energy, frequency, and vibration. So it's very important, which was going back to early conversation, your diet, which is the information you consume, the friends you keep, and the food that you eat, right? So what it is now is that because we're having these shifts, if you're not preparing mentally, physically, and spiritually, when the breakdown in the society comes, which is just the revealing of the truth, is going to be extremely hard for people. Because when I was waking up, it was extremely hard for me. So, can you imagine that when mass consciousness is that, oh my gosh, everything we've been told is a lie? Everything. That is going to really crack people's heads. And this is why Christ said man's hearts will fail them. I don't want this to happen, but basically, like I said, when that shift comes, people are not going to know how to handle it. Some people are going to commit suicide. People are going to kill people. People are going to rape. People are going to steal. They're going to be looting. There can just be massive confusion, right? And it's the people that have been doing the work that are going to be the sane voices in the sea of chaos, right? Because the system has to break, Mark. It has to break somehow. Look, there's so many flaws in religion. Whatever religion it is, there are flaws there. It's not perfect, right? And religion is supposed to be perfect. The economic system, the debt that we have, the United States government, 36.2 trillion, it's going to come to an end. And then the whole look at what government, I mean, I'm anti-government, but look at what this Trump administration is discovering that the Democrats were doing. And I'm not saying that his administration is the savior and they're coming to do good work. But what I am saying is that they're exposing things that the other side did. And the other side are going to attack him and his side. And in doing that, they're going to expose themselves even more. And more truth is going to come out. And people are going to be like, well, it's both sides. Because you got people like Lindsey Graham, who's a war hawk. That the reason why he's opposed to the ending of the Ukraine war is because he's on the take, he's on the books getting money from all these war companies like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon and stuff. These people are enriching themselves. So my point is that at some point, all the truth is going to be revealed. And when it does get revealed, the system is going to crash. But the way they're going to, if they're losing control, the only thing they can really pull is the alien agenda card, whether it is fake, real, or a combination of both, right? But I think that the alien agenda will play a part because of the cargo cult psychology that we have in us. We would bow down to them because, like I said, look at people like Taylor Swift and like when Michael Jackson was in his heyday, people just used to faint and freak out and stuff. That is in our psyche. When greater beings come on earth, people are gonna worship them. Mark, I guarantee it. You said it very well. When the GIs are bringing all these supplies from the sky, the people were worshiping them. Can you imagine? Just like let's take an example. You have someone that's sick, and these guys, just like how in Star Trek, put you under some device or touch you, but they have some sort of device that you can't see, and they heal you, and they start healing people. What do you think is gonna happen? People could think they're God, right? So it's one of those ones I think that, you have to do the work because there's a big, big, big psyop, like a major trick that's at the end of it. I don't know exactly what it looks like, but I'm just reading the tea leaves and I'm saying that the alien agenda is involved in some form of fashion. How exactly? I don't know. But I think that looking at cargo cults, looking at antiquity, I think it's going to be the last thing because all the truth would have destroyed the system. And then people can just be looking for an excuse. Please save me. Save me somehow. That's the mentality we've been conditioned with. And they would say, hey, we've got a plan for you. We've got some saviors. And then boom. But may you want to put this chip in your brain. And then how they get you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, by then I hope I live in a forest as a hermit, but I don't know. Maybe that'll be sooner than we think. I mean, look at how quickly things changed in 2020, and yeah, I think the closest I've ever come to a true natural disaster was Hurricane Sandy, and where I was not necessarily affected as nearly as bad as other places that I saw on the news. So, but I mean, it really is an incredible thing to be witness to, and very scary at that. So, I hope that we prevail, and if there are beings from the sky that come here to manipulate us, that they have an equal but opposite force amongst them that tries to oppose them and takes our side in some sense, this galactic federation, if you will. But Todd, the Conscious Man 7, the numeral 7, that is the name of your podcast, and people can find it wherever they listen to this podcast. You recently interviewed your own father. Awesome. I'm still haven't got around to do that, but I think I might. My dad has been doing some interesting stuff lately, so who knows? Maybe I'll have a quick segment with my dad, who in some extent thinks I'm crazy. He's definitely a part of the influence for the name of the show. But as we wind down here, Todd, any other interesting interviews that you've done in the past few months that you'd like to point the audience to, or anywhere else that you'd like to promote while we're winding down?
Yeah, sure. So I'm glad you brought up the interview with my father because what I'm trying to do on my podcast is to give people information that's valuable that they can that basically solutions based. And like you said just now, and you kind of took the words out of my mouth because I was going to mention those interviews that we would probably be in the forest. And the reason for interviewing him is that he's a farmer of over 40 years experience. And growing vegetables and food and doing animal husbandry, there are a lot of things to it that a lot of people don't know. It's actually a skill, and excuse me, that skill comes from experience. So if you want to understand how to grow food well, check out the podcast I did with my father. If you have like a homestead and you want to level up your homestead, listen to the other interview as well that we talked about animal husbandry, because they actually have a bit of a symbiotic relationship because things like chicken and chicken manure is the thing that you be using to put in your land, your ground, your soil as fertilizer. Because like my father said, that you can't beat that manure. That manure is the best manure. And because it's organic and it has bacteria in it, it causes reactions in the soil and all that kind of stuff. Well, is a lot more resilient to water as well, because when you get rain, the chemical fertilizer just washes out, right? So my father shared a lot of tips for raising animals. So I would implore people to go and check out those two interviews that are on my channel, because you don't because like I said, what's to come, those podcasts are gonna could end up saving your life, because if everything goes to hell in a handbasket and we're back having to grow our own food, like to actually for our household, those two podcasts having a lot of information that will help you. And then obviously if you you're someone that you want to get some advice like consultation and stuff, all of his details are there in the show notes on my show. And I just want to say that, we're living in prophetic, biblical, and exciting times at the same time. And 2025 is going to be a monumental year for humanity. And this is the time that we need to start investing in ourselves and working on ourselves, because you touched on something that's quite important, and you said that because of your martial arts training, you've taken that in terms of how you do the podcast. So your podcast being successful isn't like by chance, is because you had the discipline and the consistency from your martial arts. Now that same mindset is what I'm trying to say to people that you're going to require to get through what's to come. But the thing is that you're going to have to do it on three fronts: mentally, physically, and spiritually. So this is why I help spiritually inclined people burn fat and build muscle. And the people that um, listen to the podcast, like from on your show and on my show, are the people that get it, because we can only change ourselves. And this is what people are starting to realize, that they can't affect what Donald Trump is going to do or Vladimir Putin is going to do. What they can affect is their zone of influence, which is themselves and possibly their partner, their children, etc. Right? So if you want to really make a change in the world, you change yourself first. So if anyone listening to this podcast is ready to answer their call in the sense of changing themselves, because you're not listening to this podcast by chance. This is how the universe works. The universe sends signs to you, sometimes in the form of people, dreams, and then even podcasts. So if you are struggling in your life and you are trying to find that sense of purpose, hit me up on my Instagram at Adriano_246, or my name Todd Cave, and I will help you, because the road is very, very challenging. But the thing is that it is not impossible, and we're going to need each other. And this is one of the things that I've been trying to propagate as a message, that you work on yourselves so that you can help others. Because the more that we help others, it means other people will help us. Because the way this thing works is that you become selfless and not selfish. So when you become selfless, you start looking and checking for other people. And when you check for other people will check for you. Because think about it, the day you stop checking for people, people will start checking for you. So if you want to reverse that, check for other people, listen to shows like Mark's, listen to shows like mine. Come let me help you get into the best shape of your life so you can grow mentally, physically, and spiritually. And also, if you're on a spiritual journey, or you would like to start a spiritual journey and you would like some help removing some fears and traumas, hit me up on my Instagram at Adriano_246, or my name Todd Cave, and I will help you to get some magic mushrooms. And as you know, I have my own show. So go out there and give some support and love to the show. Share it far and wide. We have some really interesting guests. I have interviewed Sharon Daphne and Gabriel Lazar talking about Organite, and I interviewed them a couple of weeks ago, and their show should be out probably in 2 weeks. And they're going to talk about another interesting thing that basically is suppressed and gets rid of sickness. So check out for when that drops. And then I've also got some other interesting guests coming. So pay attention for that, because I'm trying to add as much value as I can in terms of useful information. Because for me now, it's all about how I can help, right? It's not just to put out shows that, just to get clicks and stuff. I genuinely want to help humanity, and I genuinely want to help people on their path, whether it is through my coaching, the information, or even helping with magic mushrooms. And if you want to support the podcast, I have a store on Amazon with the store's name is called Todd and Me, and I have on one of the shirts today, which is the Conscious Man 7 logo. So if you check my links in, or any of my social media, you'll find me link tree there to the Amazon store, Todd and Me. So that those shirts and gear we've got tank tops, hoodies, and sweats, and t-shirts, and that helps support the podcast and help us to grow, because like I said, having a podcast is a lot more difficult than it looks, and it takes a lot of time, and it costs a lot of money as well to produce good quality shows and video editing and all that kind of stuff. So, if you can help support the podcast and help us to keep having some amazing guests, then that would be much appreciated. And Mark, I just want to say you thanks for having me back on your show again. Really love talking to you. We always have some interesting conversations. And what I want to say is that, not only just to you, but to other people listening, we don't have to agree on everything. This is one of the problems that we have in the world, where we think that we have to agree with every single thing another person says. You can respectfully disagree with someone and listen to their point, and then you can also learn something, because, no one is the oracle of truth. And if anyone is going to tell you that they're the oracle of truth, maybe that's a person you shouldn't be listening to, because the people that tell you that they don't know everything have a little bit of understanding that they don't know everything. And some of it is just reading the tea leaves and how we interpret information. So, really good to chat with you, Mark. Really enjoyed it. And hope to have many more conversations with you, because, we're living in interesting times, and there's going to be more to share in the future.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for making the time tonight, Todd, and to the audience out there. All of the links Todd mentioned are linked in the episode description below, and we'll see you on the next episode. Until then, immerse yourself in the moment wherever you are in the now.